Now, it is such a huge subject. I mean, we're talking about possibly the greatest prophetic fulfillment in the last 2,000 years. That it's inevitable with the present pause in the peace talks that many people are coming up with alternative suggestions, and they are. I mean, the publications out of Israel are absolutely abuzz with the opinions of different people. And of course, the person who comes up with the winner could well be the next prime minister of the nation of Israel. So there's a lot at stake here, and there are a lot of people coming up with answers. I thought it would be good today to educate all of us about what is really happening behind the scenes right now. Now, let's lay the foundation. We know that the Palestinians and the Israelis negotiated with the prodding of U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry for 9 months. And they negotiated. But nobody knows for sure what they talked about because they kept everything secret. However, finally, they hit a brick wall. They hit some kind of an impasse. And everybody started looking for a way out, and they wanted to make sure that the other guy was blamed for the breakdown of the talks. Well, finally, Mr. Mahmoud Abbas announced that he was forming a unity government with Hamas. Well, Hamas is declared a terrorist organization by the United States, by Israel, by the European Union, and so that was Netanyahu's chance to say, okay, it's Abbas's fault. He's now formed a coalition with a terrorist organization. And Hamas actually has it in its constitution that it is bent on the destruction of the state of Israel. Israel said, we can't negotiate with someone that it's in their charter that they're going to destroy us. Nobody would do that. So that became the convenient exit for Israel. Now, Mahmoud Abbas, because they were coming up to the very last month of the negotiations, and Israel was supposed to release another 26 prisoners. And Israel said, well, are you going to come back and negotiate more after this month, or are you jumping out? Well, Israel stalled releasing the 26 prisoners past, I think 3 or 4 days past the deadline. And so Mahmoud Abbas used that excuse to go join 15 international organizations, which he had said he would not do unilaterally. And then everything just rolled backwards downhill. Then came the announcement of the coalition between Hamas and Fatah, and the whole thing fell apart. Well, when all this happened, President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry said, we're not giving up on the talks. But here's what we're doing. We're going to pause to see what's possible and what's not possible. After 9 months of intensive negotiations, it became obvious that Kerry had concluded that some things just were not possible. So he said, we're going to analyze during this pause. We're going to pause a few months. And that's what he said, to analyze what we think is possible and what's not possible. And he was telegraphing that the next step forward then would be an interim agreement. Let's get what's possible done, and then let's find a way to put off what is not possible until a later time. Now, that's interesting because the Bible actually prophesies such an arrangement. It prophesies an interim agreement, not a final agreement. So it looks like we're on course here to see the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. However, over the last few days, there have been some really interesting developments. For one, Avigdor Lieberman, who is the foreign minister of Israel, some people think he's the second most powerful politician in Israel, had some things to say. Mr. Naftali Bennett, that many people think is the next star, the next political rising star in Israel, he's got something very interesting to say. Well, let's sort of analyze the positions that have surfaced over the last 7 to 10 days. Tzipi Livni is the justice minister of Israel. She's the one that Netanyahu chose to lead the peace negotiations, and she has been over the last 9 months. Well, Zippy Livni apparently is still trying to breathe life into the Oslo Peace Accords that now are 21 years old, originally signed back in 1993 between Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin. Now she's still trying to bring that formula to a close. However, Lieberman commented about this, said, "This reminds me of a quote from Hegel that governments never learn anything from history." The Interior Minister talked about the continuation of the status quo. Now, this is another possibility. Maybe we should just leave things like they are. Forget negotiations. We're muddling along. And the more we negotiate and the more we talk about it, the more conflict is stirred up. I mean, we went through 2012 with not one terrorist death. But now we're talking and everybody gets stirred up and people think they've got to go make a point, and so they try to storm through a checkpoint, and the Israelis shoot at them, and they shoot back, and somebody gets killed, and now everything starts degenerating. Well, that's what's been happening. Anyway, Livni, she wants to see this thing through. She thinks that a peace deal can be done. However, she's probably willing to give more than Netanyahu is willing to give, but he's her boss. She's working for him. So anyway, that's where that stands. Now, Lieberman said this: the government must initiate a clear plan that has united ministerial support. The prime minister must do this as soon as possible, because if we do not initiate a plan, one will be forced on us that we do not want and is not in our interest. Now, Livni said the same thing. She said, we better get a deal, or else someone will do it for us. They're speaking of the international community, obviously. So they feel like that the international community, if it gets desperate enough and determined enough, it can actually dictate to Israel the terms of an agreement. Other people might disagree with that, but for Israel to fight the whole world doesn't seem to be a good choice. Well, in the meantime, Naftali Bennett comes along, and he's got quite a new proposal, and this is the one I wanted to go through with you so that you could see what he is proposing, because he's pounding away. He said, look, we've been trying this Oslo thing for 21 years. It hasn't worked. We tried unilateral withdrawal with Ariel Sharon, and all they did was fire 8,000 rockets at us over the last, since 2005, since the unilateral withdrawal. That didn't work. He said, I have a plan that will work. And I want to go through this plan with you because it's a very interesting plan. He actually draws a map, but in a nutshell, his plan is to withdraw from Area C. Now, let me describe what we're talking about here. During the Oslo Accords, there was a phased process that was created. And they created Area A, Area B, Area C. And the first part that was supposed to go over to the Palestinians so they could self-rule was Area A. Well, it has now gone over to the Palestinians. They are administering Area A. And also Area B is largely Palestinian, and there are no Israelis living in either Area A or B. So Bennett says, look, let's just withdraw, turn it over to the Palestinians, give them their self-rule. They can run their own utilities. They can run their own schools. Let's turn it over to them. But he said in Area C, you've got 350,000 Jews in Area C, and you got only 50,000 Arabs. Why should we withdraw from there? Let's annex Area C. That will give us enough land to serve as a security buffer. We can give full citizenship to those 50,000 Arabs. We've already got 1.6 million Arabs with citizenship in Israel anyway. It won't bother a thing. And we can annex Area C. Of course, the reply is, but the whole world will condemn you. But Bennett said the whole world condemns us anyway. They don't recognize our right to East Jerusalem. They don't recognize our right to any of the settlements that we have. They don't recognize our right to annex the Golan Heights, which we have done. He said, so it'll just be a little bit more static, but he said they'll get used to it after a while. So Bennett is saying, we've tried all these other things. They don't work. We've got a chance here. We've got an Area C, with 350,000 Jews and with only 50,000 Arabs. We should go ahead and annex it. Let's sort of do it in phases. Let's annex Gush Etzion first. Gush Etzion is very close to the southern border of Jerusalem, and most people agree that Gush Etzion will end up inside of Israel whenever the peace deal is struck, whenever the lines are drawn. Now, Bennett knows he's saying, let's not do this by agreement, because he doesn't think they can get an agreement. He believes Mahmoud Abbas is going to insist that East Jerusalem is the capital of the new Palestinian state. So he's saying, let's just go ahead and do it unilaterally. Let's annex Gush Etzion, and then let's annex Area C, and let's go ahead and do these things now. And yes, there will be weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth internationally for a while, but they'll get used to it. They've already got used to the other. As a matter of fact, this past week, Australia said we're no longer going to refer to East Jerusalem as occupied territory. And of course, they never should have called it occupied territory. The only country that occupied it was Jordan, who occupied it in the War of Independence in 1948. And then Jordan attacked Israel in 1967. Israel counterattacked and took the occupied territories from Jordan. And now then the whole world says Israel has occupied territories. The truth of the matter is, East Jerusalem belonged to no one. It was part of the Palestinian mandate, the British mandate, actually. It was under the Ottoman Empire prior to World War I, and then the British took it over from World War I until 1948. That's when the Jordanians moved in and by force took East Jerusalem and occupied it for 19 years. Well, then when the Jordanians attacked Israel, thinking they were going to destroy the nation of Israel, Israel counterattacked and ended up with its troops sitting on the Jordan River. They took East Jerusalem, they took all of Judea, Samaria, and now everybody howls at the top of their voice. They're the occupiers. Well, they just replaced one occupier with another. The fact is that territory has belonged to no one for hundreds of years. Now think about this. The Palestinian territories belonged to no one. There were no states there. There were no nations there. These were just territories being administered by, first of all, the Ottomans, and then later on by the British. So that's the situation. Now then, Israel is in control of this, all the way from Jerusalem to the Jordan River. And Bennett is saying, look, let's let the Palestinians rule themselves. But this Area C, 350,000 Jews, 50,000 Arabs, let's do it. Let's solve this problem.